you're an organizer, an influencer, an ecosystem builder, someone interested in startups, you organize an angel group, maybe give your elevator pitch. There is no box, but if you want to give the elevator pitch on Jim Roberts, please do.
Yeah. So in 2000, I was living in the city of Charlotte and noticed that there was no ecosystem for high growth technology entrepreneurs during the dot-com boom. And Charlotte was promoting itself as the new city of the city of the New South. They were going to be the next Atlanta. And I was looking around going, well, where are these technology companies that every other city is trying to grow? And so I started an ecosystem organization called First Round. And for the next 2.5 years, we sold out every single event. And we had to move to 5 bigger restaurants to hold the crowd. And then the dot-com crash happened, 9/11 happened, and all my sponsorship funding evaporated because no one wanted to work with the dot-coms who had no money because there was no funding. And the city of Asheville called 3 days later after I decided to shut it down and said, hey, we want you to run our ecosystem and we have a job for you. You don't have to run your own nonprofit that has no money, but you we'll give you a salary. So come run our ecosystem, start our ecosystem, and build an angel network. And I did that for the next 5 years. And Asheville is a pretty nice place to be, but I'm not a type B personality that Asheville is known for. I'm pretty much a type A, even though I work in kind of the nonprofit space. I'm very motivated, very driven. So I moved to Raleigh, went to work for the North Carolina Department of Commerce in the International Trade Division of all places, and got to go to the Paris Air Show, the London Air Show. I got to represent aerospace and technology and infotech and alternative energy, and got to travel the world representing North Carolina and how can North Carolina export more. And then I took the strangest job of my career, which is an organization called COIN. It's a Center of Innovation for Nanobiotechnology. So how do you deliver drugs through nanotechnology, which I really knew nothing about, and they knew that I knew nothing about it, but they knew that I was a networker and a connector. And I'll be really brief on this story, but on I believe it's my 10th day of this job, and they sent me to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a conference on nanotechnology. And I knew no one at this whole conference, didn't know a soul. But I was walking down the hallway and I overheard that they needed a place to hold next year's conference. And North Carolina is the #3 state for nanotechnology. And that's what I was there for. And I spoke up and I said, well, how does this happen? And they said, if you can raise $15,000 in the next, I believe, 6 weeks, you're competing with the city of Houston. Whoever comes up with that money first wins. And I thought, well, city of Houston can find $15,000 in the couch, right? They can find it in anywhere. An oil man spends that on lunch, right? So turns out I won. And a year later, we had 17 countries and 17 states and 300 people come to Greensboro, North Carolina, because they had just opened the nano school of the Joint School of Nano at UNCG, and the other school there. And so I worked there for a while, was their lead connector, kind of a business development person, raising sponsorships, and then got recruited to Wilmington. And of course, I think you and I've talked about this, who doesn't want to live at the beach? So why can't there be a startup ecosystem, an angel network that's active locally, and create an ecosystem at the beach? And while it's taken 7 years, we just had I would say one of our first exits. So a company that probably most of your viewers are aware of, a company called Untapped, recently got a private equity in a serious injection of capital. And the angel investors that got involved have all exited. So that's a long story of my 20-year career of building ecosystems, 5 ecosystems within North Carolina, including now Wilmington.
Cool. And what's your focus now? Is it still Wilmington, or you're
Yeah, I'm
diversifying?
very much focused on Wilmington. I spend time in Wake Forest, North Carolina, north of Raleigh, because this is where my son is. It's really that simple. It's spending time with my son during this pandemic, and just being a single father and trying to help raise my son, which is a lifelong dream to be a father. So I needed to take that very seriously. And so now we have the Network for Entrepreneurs in Wilmington that you came and spoke to at our Mystery Startup Theater event. I also run the Wilmington Angels for Local Entrepreneurs, which is WHALE. I just started a new website, which is kind of like a WRAL TechWire or a GretBeat that's only for Wilmington, called 91omg.biz, the 910 area code. And I just started my own podcast called 3 Sips of Advice, where it's a video podcast where we have a guest and he or she may have a cold beverage or a coffee and answer 3 questions that we send to them. And that's really what I'm up to.
That's awesome. Ecosystem, it has been an ecosystem building. I mean, I think about like Brad Feld and that set are like 20-year startup ecosystem. It's always 20 years, next year it's still 20 years. And that was sort of I feel like he gave a lecture at American Tobacco Campus here in Durham, and I went to it, and it was sort of like formative and like this totally makes sense. What's your, do you have like an origin story for like why, or what's your why maybe? Like, why do you want to do this, and what's your why to keep you motivated?
Sure. So when I was in Charlotte, I was working for a web design firm. And so all of my prospects were these .com companies who didn't have any money. And if they don't have any money, they couldn't sign a contract to do the web for us to do the web design. So that's why I created the room. I created the event so the entrepreneurs could meet the investors, could meet the service providers, could meet the media, and everyone an entrepreneur needed was in that room. So the thinking was, of course, that if you help an entrepreneur introduce them to an investor and they get funded, hopefully they would scratch the back of the guy who made the introduction. And I was simply selling websites. That's what I was doing. And then the ecosystem became much more exciting than selling websites, which had really become a commodity that anyone with a little computer skill could do some HTML work and do a website. So the prices of websites were coming down, and that got to be a harder and harder business to be in.
Yeah. Why do you think that? Yeah.
Another factor I would say, another factor is my father was a basketball coach. And I really think of these entrepreneurs as my players as much as he thought of his players as, his basketball players. These guys are people that I lead, I coach, and when I believe in them and they're ready, then I open every contact that I have and hope that they succeed. So when you have a player or an entrepreneur succeed, there's a pretty big pride in that. And I think I caught that bug much more strongly than I ever thought I would. And I really enjoyed that part of it, is being part of that team.
Yeah, I think, one thing that seems to be a common thread is like purpose, fulfillment, and, emotional well-being. And there's all kinds of benefits from seeing these successes more so than like a P&L or like, did you hit your OKRs for the quarter?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like now that's like your dopamine, like, man, if I can make more people successful, everybody wins. The high school coach, or you said basketball coach, I don't know what level, but
high school.
I almost think about the high school coach, often unheralded, not the like Division I salary or anything, but really, and in a very informative or formative, I guess, timeline in men and women, boys and girls' lives, like 14, 15 to 18, like ultimately being unsung heroes in the development of these kids into young adults. But like,
my dad
obviously you're not getting it up to 14, but yeah, like
my dad was 21 when he started coaching high school basketball. So these kids that he's coaching are 3 years younger than he is.
Yeah.
Some of them have already passed away because of whatever health issue, and he was their coach. I just don't think of it that way. My dad, he was my basketball coach. So when I was 18, I guess he was 38, and I thought he was 58, right? I didn't really think about the age difference, but I recently saw him in Chicago, and he was like, yeah, I was only 3 to 4 years older than my high school players. Yeah.
Yes, that's crazy. So what's next for in terms of going back to ecosystem building as a broader concept or as a category, what value have you seen it create in your market now that you're working with in terms of Wilmington, and where do you see that going, and the role of ecosystem?
Well, yeah, to where it's going is we're really following the Charleston, South Carolina model. They have done a really good job of balancing. I don't like to use the term quality of life, because quality of life is very different for everybody, but quality of place is, again, they have quality of place, they have a high standard of living. They have tremendous income as they've added technology jobs, and they've added companies like Boeing and so forth. And so, can Wilmington be the North Carolina version of Charleston, where you have a great place to live, but also a great quality of place, and great salaries, and in an environmentally clean place? We've got some work to do on the water issues in Wilmington, but as far as where the ecosystem is going, we're just getting started. I'm very excited. Again, we just had an exit with Untapped, which started in 2013, right when I started the job at UNC Wilmington, opening the incubator. It was then a father and son team, and then 7 years later, which is in that 5 to 7 year window of what a startup is supposed to go, on that 7th year, they had an exit. And had grown from a father and son team of 2 to 125 employees in a building bought by the Goodnights of the SaaS fame. That building that Untapped is in is a Goodnight-owned building. And a little known fact, it was the scene where Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son, was killed in the filming of the movie The Crow. Huh. So if you think of Untapped, there's another company that recently got acquired called Player Space. We have a unicorn that's maybe a double unicorn at this point, called Encino, Ncino, which is really a spin out of publicly traded bank, Live Oak Bank. And we have, I may get called on this, but I believe in my recording, we have the second highest attendance of any startup organization in the state of North Carolina. So we're averaging well over 125 people per event. The only event that I can find that's bigger is the Launch Bio event that Joan Seifert Rose is putting on in downtown Durham for the biotech industry. And our events, as you know, are high energy, and the entrepreneurs are getting a lot out of it. The CIE is full, which is the university incubator. The Tech Mountain space is full, which is another co-working space in town. There's another co-working space that's opening. There's 2 co-working spaces opening in downtown. One is called the Genesis Block, which is owned by my friend Gerard Newkirk. And then there's a co-working space out of Austin, or out of Texas, that's opening downtown in a restored building. So that's pretty exciting. So even though we're kind of in this pandemic, and what I didn't mention is Live Oak Bank just announced a $600 million venture fund in Wilmington for fintech. Now, if you add all that up, that's pretty exciting. Outside of Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte, where else is that happening in North Carolina? So again, with all of that happening at the beach, that's a lot of progress in 7 years.
That's right. Why are ecosystems important? If you had to take a step back, why?
Yeah. It's about the connections that are being made at events. It's about, I think one of the most important things I did was what I call the coastal corridor, where I brought people like yourself from the Raleigh-Durham market and introduced them to the Wilmington ecosystem and the individual entrepreneurs that we have. Now, if I had never invited you, what did you know about the ecosystem in Wilmington before you stepped on our stage that day? Did you know very much?
Far less. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So you know, what I did with you, I've done it with the Biotech Center. I've done it with NC IDEA. I've done it with the North Carolina Technology Association. I've certainly done it with CED. Um, I've had this great flow of very important people from the Triangle who typically make their trip to Wilmington about their beach house. And if I invite them on a Thursday, they kind of make it a weekend to come and stay in Wilmington. So I've only had 2 people turn me down in the last 7 years to come and speak in Wilmington. And for whatever reason, no one had done that before. Maybe they didn't all have the same connections, but I've had no resistance in inviting people from the Triangle, even if they didn't have a beach house, to come down. And I think I'm willing to make the bet or make the investment of political capital much earlier than other ecosystem leaders have tried in most cities. So, like I said, I think of the entrepreneurs as my players, and I'll open any door for them. And I don't, you know, I make a few milestones. I make the entrepreneurs achieve a few milestones before I open the big VC doors. But I don't hesitate too much on that. I hope I'm a good judge of character. And if I can have a good conversation and they give me the right answers that I'm looking for in good entrepreneurs, then I'll I'll open those doors, and I don't hesitate to do that. And I think that's unfortunately very uncommon in most cities.
Yeah. And are you, I mean, so these organizations are your own, really, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
this isn't,
no, we get no funding from the city, no funding from the state. We really have about $25,000 of annual support from law firms. Well, we don't even have a law firm sponsor right now. Our biggest sponsor is an accounting firm who certainly has benefited from their participation because they're the first ones announced on stage as a sponsor and a supporter in our newsletter. NC IDEA has been a very generous sponsor. We've had some individuals who believe in what we're doing. We're trying to build an ecosystem maybe for their son, their daughter, their grandchild to live in Wilmington. And that's what they're hoping that I do is I support another Untapped that grows 125 jobs instead of their son or daughter moving to the Triangle or to Charlotte or to DC or to Silicon Valley. Why not stay in Wilmington? And that's part of the reason we get some support, but we get no city support. Whale is a very small angel group, a network really. And, you know, these are a small number of people that have believed in me over my career or are personal friends or got frustrated with some other local angel networks that didn't invest locally. We've also got half of our portfolio are veteran started companies, and that's not a focus, that's not intentional. But I also recruited the Bunker Labs chapter to Wilmington. So we mixed the Network for Entrepreneurs in Wilmington with Bunker Labs, and we just co-hosted events, co-branded events. And because of that, we got a nice critical mass of local veterans. And North Carolina is certainly a very veteran heavy state with the 13 bases that we have in North Carolina. And a lot of them, after their active military service, choose to live at the beach, which of course we all want to live there. So veterans would too. And half of our portfolio are veteran started companies. And what we found is they're much more able to focus on the day-to-day stuff. Your civilian entrepreneur may get more distracted by the distractions of living in a tourism destination like the beach, where it's intentional that there are distractions. We found that the veterans are much more able to focus maybe Monday through Saturday and maybe use that Sunday as their day off. So it's, we're very proud of our portfolio and most of it's local. Certainly we have one company in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is Crazy Ray. He makes the trip all the way from Myrtle Beach, even before Whale invested, because Myrtle Beach is still starting their ecosystem and growing it. That's not as mature as the Wilmington, which is still very new, right? You said 20 years for Brad Feld. I mean, Monica Doss was one of the co-founders of CED, and that was 35 years ago. If I can talk about the difference, is that I think CED is one of the top 5 reasons that Raleigh-Durham is such a strong economy. And one of the reasons for that is because they've never let CED die, right? In the triad, there used to be the Piedmont Triad Entrepreneur Network, and the dot-com recession, it died, right? Charlotte, my organization, ran out of money after dot-com and after the 9/11. Asheville system has come and gone and started up again. But the CED has never lost their funding. So they've been steady as a foundation, as a cornerstone for entrepreneurship in Raleigh-Durham. And Monica Doss once told me that 25 cities, when she ran CED, 25 cities from around the world used to come to the Triangle to say, how did you do this?
That's crazy. Who are you competing with in Wilmington? You know, meaning like, obviously I want to kind of speak to why is this valuable and how does this help us build like kind of economic and community type level resiliency. But before that, like, if it's obvious that this is beneficial for many reasons, which it might not be, we can kind of talk more about that. But what's the competition? Just like not enough dollars in government to support you, or not enough dollars in the local business community, or why isn't everyone just like, yes, how can we help, and to a level that you would feel is maybe greater than the level of support now?
Well, I would say we're all competing in a very small bucket of money. Wilmington really doesn't have a whole lot of industry. You think of PPD, you think of Live Oak Bank, City and County, Corning, GE. Corning and GE aren't going to support an ecosystem. That's just not, they don't see that as something they should do. So we're all kind of competing for the same dollars. I mean, Tech Mountain really doesn't look for sponsorships. They're just a co-working space, much like a loading dock. I would say they're quite different than HQ Raleigh, even though they have a partnership. Tech Mountain really is, and I say this right to their face, Tech Mountain is like the Ritz-Carlton of co-working space. It is the most beautiful furniture you can imagine. They have a they have a conference table that actually goes back into the wall, and the bottom of the conference table is a chandelier.
Okay.
So think about it, converting a space and that table that you don't want in there because you need it for networking to stand around and shake hands and stuff. The bottom of that table becomes the chandelier for the room. And that probably costs more than, I know that costs more than 5 years of my annual budget just right there, right? So they're not hurting for resources. But I think they would also agree they don't necessarily do a lot of programming for the companies that are in the co-working space. Their thinking is that we're the space that you sit in. They certainly host events, but it's not their own programming. So they'll bring in a Fred Hutchison to come in and give a speech. They'll bring in a venture capitalist to come in and give a speech. They certainly have a mentor network. Again, I was the first director of the CIE, which is the Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at UNC Wilmington. So I set up a lot of their programming. They're still doing programming. They have a new director who came in from Michigan, Diane Durantz. And Diane and I have a pretty good relationship. We serve a lot on these committees, and we represent Wilmington in NC IDEA at the North Carolina Technology Association, sometimes at CED, to represent Wilmington and make sure that Wilmington is represented. So I would say there's co-opetition, if that cheesy word still exists, between Diane and I. We're very friendly, but we're also kind of scrapping for the same limited resources. So we compete for the same grants, that kind of thing.
Yep. And I guess some of it to me is like kind of the longer term view of an ecosystem builder that's not immediately, it's not a check you can cash today if you're a government, a business, even a resident, right?
Yeah.
So why would I do anything? also, I'm just making some statements that you can comment on, but also, tech isn't always seen as good. Tech can be seen as, there's exclusivity versus inclusivity. It's all white males from Silicon Valley, or it's going to replace jobs and it's going to turn things into robots. And North Carolina has a lot of rural areas where it's like, oh, we're going to lose our drivers and our farmers. I think the opposite to that can be made. It can be a force for inclusivity and equity. It can be a force for, more income equality. It can be a force for a lot of things that are good, more tax base, more everything. But it hasn't always been the case. I mean, look at San Francisco and how many people have been displaced. And it's just sort of like, it was kind of like culture killing there.
Yeah.
Make or comment to any of that. But ultimately what I want you to do is sort of make the case for why an ecosystem around technology is great for any community and why we should all be listening. Because not every place is Raleigh-Durham, but Raleigh-Durham is not a big, compared to San Francisco, compared to another, there's always more we can all do. And it's important to just know where we're at and chart our path forward, and make sure there's alignment and support. So as I guess speak to that, how are you?
Well, the two things that I would say is, one, that we have a huge underemployment problem in Wilmington. You have a pretty big university where a lot of people come to Wilmington to go to university because, I mean, again, who wouldn't want to go at a university at the beach, right? If you're 18 years old, graduating high school, and going to school at the beach sounds pretty good. So if those people graduate, or even if they don't graduate, they still want to live in Wilmington, but now they have maybe college debt, and all there exists are service jobs, tourism jobs. So that's why I was recruited to UNCW, because the chancellor at the time, he saw that no one in the community was grabbing or championing entrepreneurship, but you had employment problems in Wilmington, especially this was 2013. So coming out of the last recession, there was a need for a new set of jobs. So Wilmington doesn't have the same problem, but at the same time, where it didn't have a whole lot of jobs, it was getting more expensive to live there by the day, right? Because you have an awful lot of people coming from the Northeast that probably live in Boston that want to live near the water, but would like to lower their cost of living by 75% maybe, where they buy $1 million house in Boston, they can buy the same house for $250 in Wilmington and live on that $750 for the rest of their lives. So you've got a problem with wages, but you've got a rising cost of living to live at the beach. Because I don't know if you know, again, you and I are getting to know each other, but I-40 was just opened in 1989 all the way to Wilmington. This is after Michael Jordan had already left Wilmington, and the I-40 still didn't go all the way to the beach. So, Wilmington's got a pretty nice airport. You've got all these people who can fly their friends in and be at the beach in no time, and it's a low cost of living. And that happens every day in Wilmington. Even I did it. I would have a ton of friends fly into Wilmington, and I wouldn't even take them to my house. We would go straight to the beach at my favorite tiki bar, T-I-K-I, tiki bar, and have a great, blackened fish sandwich and some fries and a cold beverage on a Friday. And they thought I was living in heaven, right? So I would say that is the need for the ecosystem and the need for more technology jobs. And frankly, we need more biotechnology jobs. I mean, we've got PPD is one of the biggest companies in the world for clinical research. But wouldn't it be great to have a local biotech industry cluster to grow the companies that PPD could work with? And now one of the assets that we have is one of the top 5 topics right now in Wilmington is they're considering selling the county-owned hospital. So New Hanover County Hospital Regional Medical Center could bring in as much as $2 billion to the county if they sold the hospital much like they did in Asheville, or much like they, and more importantly to our conversation, is what they've done in Danville, Virginia. In Danville, they sold their hospital, and with those proceeds actually built the launch place, which is an ecosystem in itself, and it has a fund. And if you take their money, you have to create a certain amount of jobs in Danville, Virginia, right? So they're doing investing as a way to do economic development, which is happening nowhere else except for Launch Place. And now Greensboro has a little bit of that. So think about that as a way. Venture capital is very hard to find. If the Launch Place wasn't there in Danville, there wouldn't be much funding for startups there. So this is a way to do economic development recruiting within the startup field and job creation, with the hope that, one of the things that we haven't talked about is someone like Untapped is you've suddenly got 125 employees. Let's say all of them had some equity in Untapped when it was a startup. Now they've had an exit, and now you've created some generational wealth for those early employees of Untapped. And now those people can choose to be entrepreneurs. Actually, I've had one contact me and say, I want to be an angel investor. Well, that person knows how much I worked on behalf of Untapped, and said, well, I'd like to play that role too for future entrepreneurs. And that's really exciting. So that's, in my experience, that's what these cities are trying to do when they build a technology or an emerging growth, kind of a gazelle unicorn kind of ecosystem.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and you said it, but like specifically, one of the trending topics I feel like in my own head at least is like resiliency. So, I'd love to see, and like just, communication and collaboration. So, I mean, to get to resiliency, to get to like success and traction of an ecosystem, what are, sort of the key conversations and collaborations that need to happen from the start, and then how do those relationships need to grow, over time? Like, yeah, I guess you could take that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all around surrounding the entrepreneurs with the resources that they need. They need, obviously, the hottest topic is investor capital, but they also need mentors. Wilmington is not a young city. It's a pretty old city with a lot of semi-retired and retired people that have made enough money to be able to live at the coast. Can they, what did they do in their career to earn that kind of money that they can afford to live at the coast? Were they executives? Were they marketing people? Were they salespeople? Were they entrepreneurs in another city? Who do they know? One of the biggest challenges that I have is, how can you build the trust between an entrepreneur and a potential new mentor, that there's enough trust built to say, hey, I knew 5 people in that industry back in Boston. Can I call them on your behalf and make some introductions, and maybe they'll become clients or strategic investors? That's the next step for Wilmington. And it's really hard to do that. So I think that happens in most major successful ecosystems. Wilmington really struggles on how to sell outside of our own county lines. Who is helping us open these doors? Not necessarily in Raleigh, because I can do that, but how can a Wilmington entrepreneur become connected in Charleston, in Atlanta? And the way I'm doing that is by, by becoming the PR firm. So I reach out to the media organizations like a Dig South in Charleston, or the Hippopotamus out in Atlanta. I mean, I've got people from those organizations who have agreed to make a trip to Wilmington to write a story about our ecosystem. Now, why else would they? Again, if I have a story, and you can see the passion in my eyes and my smile right now as I talk about this, that comes across when I talk to these people. But if I also have, hey, come to the beach, right? isn't it a great story that we're building an ecosystem at the beach? And if nothing else happens, I remember I recruited Paul Singh to make a trip. He's one of the founders of 500 Startups Accelerator. And he was doing a US tour of cities. And as long as you could raise $5,000, he would come to your city and spend a few days and talk to your entrepreneurs. And I got him. And he was ridiculed by his friends by saying, "Oh man, you're just going there to spend some time at the beach." I filled every second of his day. He never saw the damn beach. He never saw a piece of sand because I had him scheduled from donuts till, nighttime. I mean, he didn't have time to go see the sand. So I got my money's worth out of him. And at the end of the day, he said, "Hey, this is one of the top 5 best cities that we've been to on this." It was called the Results Junkies Tour. And he went to 35 cities, and he said, "This is one of the top 3 to 5 cities that we've gone to as far as the organization, the attentiveness of the people in the room." And he actually came back a year later. So, yeah, those are the kinds of connections that we're trying to make for our entrepreneurs that aren't necessarily everyday thoughts on how you build an ecosystem. I don't think most ecosystem leaders, when they're starting out, think about the importance of being known. And here's another important point that we haven't talked about, if I may, for a second, is
Yep.
I don't think you recruit entrepreneurs. I think you can attract entrepreneurs, because I think the best recruiter for your city are successful entrepreneurs, the stories that get out. I'll give you a challenge right here, Nick. Name another company, maybe you're an exception. When I ask 99% of the people, they don't know an answer. But name another company in Austin, Texas, besides Dell.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's my favorite city in the world. And when I went to South by Southwest the first time, I've been 10 times to that conference. The only company I knew of was Dell, but it has now this reputation as a technology startup hub, but no one can name any other companies except for Dell Computer. And that was a PC company that is, 25 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. I feel like I was going to say South by Southwest Inc.,
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that I did. He was the leader of South by Southwest Technology Conference, was the speaker in Wilmington at the 1-year anniversary of the CIE incubator. And the whole thought was, how do we make our film festival into the southeastern version of South by Southwest? And that's why I brought him. And I had Laura Baverman, who had Exit Event at the time, and she was our narrator of we called it a riverside chat instead of a fireside chat. And we had 300 people at our first venture conference. And I still have people to this day pull me aside and say, "That was a damn good conference." And, a few years later, Hugh Forrest is the guy's name from South by Southwest. He invited George from True Colors to come and give a speech in Austin. And I really doubt that would have happened if Hugh hadn't made the trip to Wilmington.
Yep.
So those are the things that you just never know what's going to pay off when you make an introduction like that. Hell, we've had some of our speakers at our events that you attended and spoke at. Some of those speakers have become angel investors in Wilmington companies, and they simply met those companies at the event that they came to speak for. So there's no better payoff than that, right? Unexpected angel, here's a $25,000 check for an angel investment that probably would have never happened.
Yeah. Specific to like PPD in that example, which I thought was interesting, and the overlap of the other, New Hanover kind of potential sale. As you as an ecosystem builder, what are you doing to try to leverage those two thoughts for the betterment of the community?
Well, it's really an education of the community on what's possible. I would say 99% of Wilmington right now is thinking it of as a negative if the hospital were sold. And I'm not saying it's going to be a positive, but I'm just saying here's an example of something really interesting that happened that we really need to happen in Wilmington. We would love to have some kind of fund like what's coming out of the launch place. I mean, they're investing $200,000, $125,000, $200,000 in some of these companies. And that's much beyond really what my organization, my angel network, is going to be able to do. The hospital has also created kind of an innovation hub, which I can't say I've seen much from it yet, but we have some deal flow building to do in the life sciences sector for sure. So that's not a fair criticism of them, but they have started this innovation center. And PPD is just really hard. Fred Eshelman is the founder of PPD. He lives in Wilmington. The challenge with PPD is that they're not really, the scientists of PPD are really in the triangle, and it's more of the kind of office staff that lives in Wilmington. So the CEOs, the sales guys, the accountants kind of thing, those are the people that are in Wilmington much more than the hardcore scientists. So, if something were to develop for PPD, it's probably not going to come out of the headquarters. It's probably going to come out of the RTP office, but nonetheless, maybe PPD financially is more profitable, and that would help Wilmington. But I don't see the innovation of PPD coming out of Wilmington.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea. I mean, I think kind of one of the reasons that ecosystem building has always been relevant to me, or just important, and I don't know. I feel like a part of this, the future of ecosystem building is making sure it's sort of in the zeitgeist of everybody. Like everyone should know their why. Yep. Like, why do we want an ecosystem? Why don't we? And how do we, cross those bridges? Is that it's about just, well, you can go all the way up to it's creating a better world. We all want that. We want more everything: happiness, health, relationships, and obviously that's starting at the very top, but it is getting down to even this PPD, just using this as an example, they're an asset there. There's human assets that are there. There's ideas that are there. Well, right now, those things aren't mixing to create something and grow that would grow the pie. That would rising tide lifts all boats or whatever, which is normally good, but maybe if you're on the coast, it's sort of it's not that good, whatever. But, And what does that do? When you mix the good ideas, the investment potential, and the ability to be a potential customer and accelerate some of these things, it's like the Voltron thing. You're combining, and the sum is, or yep. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Yep. To mix up all my metaphors or cliches, but that's what's exciting about an ecosystem, because then there's more restaurants, there's more people, there's more community to be had, there's more jobs, there's more interest at the university level, there's just more interest.
Well, I would give two things on that. We had a really interesting event in Wilmington 6 months into the start of the ecosystem, and it was I call it my aspirin event. So we brought in the 5 largest employers of Wilmington, and we made them list the 5 biggest pain points in their industry. And thinking, if you had 5 companies that have enough resources to pay the bills to do some innovation, and you have each of them list 5 opportunities, then that's 25 new opportunities that the people in the room may or may have not considered. And maybe they have an existing product that could be a solution. I held this event in Asheville, and of all things, the Grove Park Inn stood up and said, we just built a $10 million spa, and we've got a mold problem because of the moisture in the room. And we have some pretty high-end clients, and we don't want our clients slipping and falling in our new $10 million spa. And someone in the room had a solution for them. And so that was a very easy win. This happened in Wilmington. We had an entrepreneur in the room who had a solution, and they ended up becoming the first investment of this company. So that's an interesting way to because I have this thing, if you have a headache, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to run to the store and get some aspirin and make that pain go away. The quickest way to make a sale is to make a pain go away for one of your prospects. And that was the whole theory of the aspirin event. And we never had a problem getting the companies to participate. It was a full sold out room. It's a very cheap way to have an innovation event for changing the way people think in your city towards why innovation is important. Because if you're selling something to Mission Hospital in Asheville, it's probably safe to assume that a Wilmington hospital will have the same problem. Wouldn't an Atlanta hospital have the same problem? Wouldn't a Charlottesville, Virginia hospital have the same problem? And then you can start scaling. And again, you solve that problem of how does a Wilmington entrepreneur sell something outside of the county lines? Well, if they have a unique product that solves a pain point, then that's a really good way to start a business.
Yep. When you took it, I mean, I'd say multiple steps further than most, which are you actually got companies in the room bringing problem statements. Yep. And one company, who knows, maybe many other things kind of, matriculated outside of that, but one company got a problem solved. They got an innovation occurred. Doesn't it? I mean, to me, that seems like obvious. Why aren't more people seeking these types of partnerships, which would lead to, community development? And I remember, this is anecdotal at best, but I lived in Atlanta for 2 or 3 years in the early 2000s, and there was no community. It was just like big corporate headquarters,
right,
and consultants and maybe some bankers, but the consultants would fly in and fly out. So
all that's changed. A guy named David Cummings changed that, or even the Georgia Tech incubator. Between those two things, David Cummings sold a company called Pardot for 9 absurd figures, and bought a building and started kind of an accelerator incubator. And he is now the king of Atlanta, along with John Yates from Morris Manning Law Firm. They are the 2 most influential people in the Atlanta ecosystem. Yeah. And all that happened after the Olympics in '96 happened after that.
Yep. No, yeah, I've been back a bit, and it's totally changed. Like, they're just, and some of it would have been natural changing, like, connecting the park through walkways and kind of like these different things to drive more interest and viability and vibrancy to the in-town areas, versus when I was there, it's just got consistent sprawl. It's like, how far away could you get from the city? And
I lived in Kennesaw.
Oh yeah. So Kennesaw, I had a colleague that lived up there, and I would drive past it. I was still driving up to Chapel Hill from time to time to see some old buddies who just stayed around in the Triangle after kind of school. But so I'd drive past that and just kind of keep going up. Then hit Greenville and Spartanburg, Greensboro, I think it goes to Charlotte, Greensboro, and then there. So but like, what was that? I mean, I'm trying to like get to that mindset. Like, before all that changed, was it just every citizen, every company, every person just was happy to like go to work and go home, and they didn't have a more, it's not altruistic, but, or is it holistic? I'm not sure the right word, but they didn't have a view of greater than their own little role in the rat race? Or like, why didn't they do it? And
I think they thought that the chambers of commerce were to play that role. And I'm sure that role has certainly changed for the chambers. The chambers don't love to play, I would say they don't like to play picking winners and losers. And so they don't like to kind of favor the startups, and the startups don't find the resources they need. And here's a stat that you may or may not believe is 65% of companies that are considering expanding consider leaving the town that they started in, because they're not finding the resources they need, and probably are being recruited. If they reach 50, 75 employees, they're probably being recruited by 1,000 different cities across America. And so they consider relocating. So I would say that's why this didn't happen before. And I know Atlanta is one of those cities that came to RTP to learn what the ecosystem assets and all that are. You know, another thing that I would like to say is that entrepreneurs need you to move with a sense of urgency. If you are running the ecosystem and you don't move as fast as the entrepreneurs, as I say, you have to have the same tone as the entrepreneurs. Nick, I think you and I are both known as maybe saying a few four-letter words from time to time. And we have the same tone as the entrepreneurs have. You have to move at the same pace that the entrepreneurs have. You have to have the same speed that they have. You cannot slow them down. If you are a speed bump for the entrepreneur in the ecosystem, they will not come back to you. If I work extremely hard to have great events, because I know if I have a bad event, that entrepreneur, the next time I have an event, they're going to think about, that was a waste of time. I didn't like the speaker. I didn't like the beer. I didn't like the food. You know, I didn't meet anybody. I didn't land any new deals. I wasn't excited to be there. I think about that every month. I think about the pace of the events. I think about the energy of the events. I am very, if I'm not the moderator, I'm a very active, vocal member of the crowd at my own events. You know, when I feel the crowd is sleeping, I change that pace. I speak up. I signal the moderator, hey, we got to kick up the energy a little bit. Maybe I bring some beers to the stage. I got to do something to make sure that everyone in that room, and this is another thing that I'd like to get across if there's ecosystems leaders that are listening, is you have to respect the topic, the speaker, and the audience equally. Most people only respect the speaker. They've invited up a VIP and they kowtow and they make that person feel like a VIP, but your audience has to have the same feeling, or again, it's really hard to get them back once you've had a bad event, or maybe two events in a row that didn't meet their expectations. But you also have to think about the topics. What are the topics that your audience wants to learn about? Raising capital is always a very hot topic, but I'm trying to get Wilmington to think about SBIR grants for the first time. There's very few SBIR grant recipients, and that's non-dilutive capital, and it's a validation point for investors. So if we're a region that doesn't have a whole lot of venture capital, we need more of those validation points. So how can we push our innovative entrepreneurs to pursue more SBIR grants, even though it's a god-awful red tape and, you know, there's a 12% chance of winning. But if you don't have local risk-tolerant capital, and SBIR grants, for nothing else, at least clears your mind that you've got everything you've got to do is out on this grant application, and maybe that application becomes part of your business plan that you hadn't considered before. But that's another thing that I really push for is SBIR grants.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's huge. I think, you know, I'm trying to find the ways to tie this up too. And I think, you know, for equal or smaller, I guess I want to hit on three things and then move to the close. I can run over, but I want to respect your time too. But, you know, what does your future look like 10 years from now, 5 to 10 years maybe? And I don't know if that's like your legacy, or if you want to do the kind of epitaph like sort of exercise, but then also like what's a takeaway from a so maybe it's four things. Jim's future view. Why should everyone in the Gen Pop care about an ecosystem? Because it's still, even as we're talking, I hear ourselves kind of be like, we're using language that means stuff in our echo chamber. But like, I want every citizen, all the people and members of the community should like be equally invested into the growth and well-being and flourishing of one another. So why should people care? And then, to your peers in smaller ecosystems looking up to you, you kind of summed up some good advice there. But then what about the big ecosystems? Like, if you're in New York or in Atlanta, it's like, what's a takeaway that you've learned that's something that either they should implement or a reason they should emulate or a reason they should partner with you in Wilmington? So I just covered a lot there. Go wherever you want.
Well, my next 5 years are probably doing much more consulting on ecosystems. Not many people have 20 years of experience of ecosystem building. And if we're going to have to rebuild our current economy because we're in a pandemic and none of us really know where the jobs are going, even though the stock market seems to be rising, I don't know how that's long-term sustainable if 25 million people are out of work. But
I like cussed. I'm surprised that we haven't used any bad words here. So that's great. Let's keep it that way. Maybe this will be the first one with no beeps. But I saw the market today. I was like, what the beep?
Yeah.
It's like, how's this happening? Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So, I'd like to, I even have a name for my consulting business. So I think that's probably where I'll be in 5 to 10 years, is consulting with cities that really, I'll be honest with you. One of the biggest problems that I kind of work on when I'm new to a city, and Wilmington is my 5th city, is moving barriers out of the way. Whether that's the good old boy network that's not very inclusive and they don't like other people making the headlines, or, if I may, kind of overcoming the failure of other bureaucrats. Bureaucrats who think they're very helpful to entrepreneurs, but again, they don't move at the pace of the entrepreneurs. So the entrepreneurs may take their phone call, but they rarely follow up on going to events and that kind of thing. So, a lot of what we've talked about today is in a big slide presentation that I put together that's, obnoxiously 80 slides, but it's something that I can divide up when I give a speech to a city or something like that. So, my legacy is, as Ben Kinney from Business North Carolina magazine put it, I'm kind of the Johnny Appleseed of entrepreneurship in North Carolina. The only city that I haven't really worked in too much is Greensboro, Winston-Salem. And again, the first thing we talked about on this podcast was the Nano conference that I'd bring to Greensboro with 300 people that had $1 million impact on the city over 3 days. So beyond that, I can't say that I've had too much impact in the triad, but I've certainly worked in Charlotte and Asheville and Durham and Wilmington. How are we going to work with bigger cities is, I think I have to have some more wins to be able to promote Wilmington for something that they would be interested in. Now, Untapped got people's attention. The day after that happened, I was on a conference call with a private equity firm out of Boston, and I said, "Hey, that company I was telling you about has already found their private equity firm, and here's the announcement." And so I think that person's going to be much more frequently in touch with, "Hey, Jim, tell me what's going on in Wilmington," because I was telling him about all these great companies. We have another company called Lapidus Solutions, which is doing facial recognition matched up with the insurance industry, so they can see 200 characteristics of your face and almost predict your longevity of life.
Oh,
yeah, think about that. So as facial recognition is becoming a very hot topic right now in this pandemic, there's a lot of articles about facial recognition, and this company's already gotten a $3 million investment from Aflac. And to make it a bonus, he's an African-American entrepreneur based at the university. So, there are great things that are happening. We just need a louder, and I'm a very loud person, as you know, but a louder channel to be able to get this message out, which is why I created that website. And I'm also a freelance writer for WRAL. So that's how I'm going to get the message out. How do I partner with these other cities? It's through success and being very loud as I say, from the lighthouses. People say, I'm going to scream it from the mountaintops. And I say, scream it from the lighthouses about the successes that we do have. And, you know, that's not promoting myself, but it's certainly promoting 7 years of really hard work to build an ecosystem. And, you know, I'm very proud of Untapped team and Player Space are companies that have gone through our ecosystem. And, you know, Joe Colopy recently spoke at one of our events, and I asked him quite frank, I said, what should an entrepreneur expect out of an ecosystem? And he said, you know, at the end of the day, they're going to open some doors, but it's really up to the entrepreneur who has to make it happen for themselves. And as I say, you know, I can walk you up to the door of opportunity as an entrepreneur, but you've got to either knock on the door, wait to be invited in, or knock the damn door down. And, you know, at that point, I've done my work. I've walked you up to the door of opportunity. I can't make the investor sign the check. I can't make your prospect sign the contract. I can't force the NIH to write you an SBIR grant, but I can walk you all the preparation up to that door of opportunity. But then it's up to you. And if you fail, you can't blame me, although that happens quite a bit. But I feel I've done my part at that point when I prepare you for a CED presentation on stage. There were, you know, 4 companies this year that presented at CED, and that's a big number for Wilmington. 4 whale companies presented at CED, so a total of 8 companies that I'm actively involved with that made it to the stage at CED this year, and that's a big deal for Wilmington. That's a pretty high number if you compared it to other cities of equal size in North Carolina. That's a pretty high number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think let's close out, because I think, you know, there's so much there, and I think, you know, just talking about ecosystems are important for the future and for what's next and why it matters, and next matters most because it's a fabric, you know. There's like kind of the fabric of our society, there's a fabric of whatever. This is sort of that, you know, there's a fabric of a community, and maybe I think it's a whole community, but maybe it's professional, but without it we don't have a lot of resilience. And so if there's one thing rocks the boat, all of a sudden there's a bunch of, you know, there's however many millions of people or hundreds of thousands. Well, I think in, you know, the county is high hundreds of thousands, whatever. A lot of people all running separately in their own individual directions, as opposed to saying, let's work together and let's build and let's rebuild. And so, I mean, that's just like, I think there's this should be an example for why that matters. And I think, you know, I like the big ecosystem and small ecosystem. I want that same mesh network to go throughout the country and eventually throughout the world, I guess. I mean, I don't, you know, works, maybe not China. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in politics for that reason, but like, you know, because we can't be overly reliant on one thing, you know. Like, I think sort of the flexible warehousing strategy is or flexible manufacturing is a good anecdote for maybe why bigger ecosystems could partner with smaller ones, because they don't want to have all their eggs in one basket. Like,
right,
all my deal flow is here, all my resources are here, all my networks are here. Like, there should hopefully be more incentive now more than ever to find these other pockets of success. I've always thought the Triangle was a great place for arbitrage. Like, you can get better deals here. You can invest less money and get more equity with a higher chance of success.
Yeah, that was a, I don't know if you watched the Gret Beat podcast this morning, but there was 3 angel investors from the Triangle, and they were talking about the rest of the country is looking at how the Triangle is so successful and how we cooperate. And that just doesn't happen in other regions. Everyone's looking out for their own deal flow. And it was a really interesting conversation. I would encourage your listeners and watchers, viewers to dial up the Coffee and Conversations by Gret Beat with the 3 investors this morning.
Yep. Yeah, I was there. And it was good. And, you know, it was the right message. And I think in every area's got ways to go. So our ways to go is like, yeah, that's great, but like, where are the big numbers? You know, money talks, return, ROI talks. Like, if all you guys and gals that are investors are making secretly super high returns and not telling anybody, then shame on you. Otherwise, you're not making it. you've got a few good outcomes. But what about your whole portfolio? Like, are you walking proof that you've got the best deals and you've had the best growth on your portfolio? Like, I don't know. We do have a lot of that sort of like quantitative talk of like, we work together and it's great deals, great arbitrage, but like, who's rich? You know, did you make money off of that? And I used to say in my business, like, one of the it's not even my business. One of the challenges here is there aren't any, and this is changing, to your point about the employees. Employee number 7 at a startup that's now walking around as a millionaire because of an outcome. Right. Sometimes it's the founders, the core team. Usually that's it. Everyone else who had an equity option might have something, but it's not like overly game changing. It's like 0, tens of thousands, maybe 6 figures.
Yeah.
Sometimes more. People don't talk, people shouldn't share everything about their money, but like, you know, a lot of the outcomes don't have that huge trickle down windfall. There's a couple in our pipeline in the community now that I think could create that, but like, except for like the times of yesteryear, the red hats, you know, I'm not sure, you know, bandwidth, I guess, channel advisor, but these were created in early 2000s at the earliest. I don't know my total history, but kind of before the new model of like equity and, you know, options and creating multiple. Joe's a great guy, but I think they were privately held. So, I mean, people might have had something, but I think the ownership had held most of it.
It did.
SAS, you mentioned SAS, major success story, privately held, 2 families, you know.
The 2 wealthiest people in North Carolina are the 2 founders of SAS. Yeah.
That's right. So it's like,
so I would say one of the 2 topics in the investor circles, and again, I'm not an investor, I simply manage the angel network, but the 2 hottest topics I hear about are, why don't we have more exits? And especially David Gardner of Co-Founders is talking about, how do we get more of the corporate strategic investors to participate? Now, you've got a red hat that participates in Bull City Ventures, but, you know, could we get additional corporate partners to raise much more of a, you know, a bigger round of a fund? So beyond the angel capital, beyond the early stage VC, where is the next stage of funding? And if you have to go out of town for that, does that also mean that those companies have to relocate to find that funding?
That's right. Yeah. And I love David and that talk track, because that's, you know, if I'm just using kind of metaphors, that's the Atlanta in the 90s syndrome. Everyone just goes to work and goes home. XYZ, Coca-Cola has a board, shareholders, advisors. Right. They all work there. They go home. Like, or how are they thinking about, they've got probably an investment manager who's a CFO who like probably does some like derivatives or some like, you know, monetary hedges for like global, you know, currency, et cetera. But are they really joining in this proactive, forward-looking thing that, you know, creates an ecosystem around their headquarters to create better well-being, more employees, more jobs, more companies that are spinoffs, and thinking about the equity in those companies as a meaningful part of their actual balance sheet? You know, it's like, they probably are. I mean, companies are smart. There's people that are way smarter than me and you. But like, it's like, I haven't seen it. I mean, in 10 years, 20 years, I haven't seen the proof in the pudding where they're like championing that. Like, oh man, our company's balance sheet is up because we invested into startups. This spinoff did that. This spinoff did that. I mean, hopefully Encino pops and Live Oak can say, look what we did. We spun something out that made us. There's a lot of these companies where you have a business, you have a large company, you're a platform, but yet if you spin this other thing out that's kind of geared or tuned differently because of multiples and valuations, that thing might have more enterprise value. Or at least the price of that equity or the value of that equity might be worth than your business is priced.
Well, maybe Bandwidth and Republic is maybe an example of that. MetLife investing in the Techstars campus in Cary, that's a new one. And some of the hospitals, like Rex has a small fund where they participate. I think Blue Cross Blue Shield may have, or maybe they invested in Bull City. But there's certainly room for more of that.
Yep. No, that's great. And I think, you know, I wanted to tie one other thing out too, which is, you know, it's not easy, you know, and everything you said and kind of hearing you talk, no one's paying you money. No one's saying, Jim, please make Wilmington a better place.
Right.
Please do this. So you might be doing things great, ungreat, perfect, imperfect, but it's not actually, it's like someone isn't like, you're doing it because you want to and because you care about the positive benefits that can happen when you have a successful ecosystem. And you're starting at the ecosystem level, not just, you could have just helped one company and then try to get some options or get some upside, but you're starting at the ecosystem level. Basically you're a volunteer, right? So like other cities or other communities or ecosystems, sort of need to take notice, like who are your champions and where are those champions and how do you, and in other places, they might need to kickstart that. They might need to say, hey, how can we be as ecosystem friendly as possible so that you'll want to invest the blood, sweat, and tears that you're investing for 7 years and counting, with another plan to be 5 or 10 more before you go off and, do consulting to help others. Or, maybe those counties and communities are just like your pipeline. So I don't want to steal your thunder. Or call Jim Roberts, email link in the bio, right? So like he'll help you.
Yeah, as we talked about at the very beginning, I was kind of a frustrated salesman when I started. I was just one of those connectors. I went to every, I'm sure you're familiar with a guy in Charlotte named Jeffrey Gittimer. He's written a lot of sales books, and one of his theories is if there's 100 butts there, your butt better be there too. And I was always there. I went to every networking event across the state for startups, and that's how I built my contacts on a wide range of industries, a wide range of geography, and people that like to invest, and people that have a very different tolerance for risk. And if they're not all in your backyard, you better have a bigger backyard. You better have a better connection of people in the region.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's great. And are you going back and forth to Wilmington now? Or are you kind of wait until quarantine time is over, or how's your?
Yeah, I'm. We're all homeschooling in North Carolina. There's no public schools, so school gets out soon, but I've got to play part-time teacher, part-time principal, part-time business owner, part-time, angel network leader. So I'm doing most of that from Wake Forest right now, eager to get back to my favorite restaurants and see my friends at the coast. But it's until there's, I don't know if we all have to wait for that vaccine, but it can't come soon enough.
Yep. Well, cool. Yes. Glad that you're staying productive and staying safe. And I was, I love these convos, and I want to have some action items too. I'd love to get down there, or maybe it's another virtual call, but yeah, maybe there's something around thinking about kind of the life science play in Wilmington and ways that we could potentially help work together. I'm thinking about a couple different partnerships that we're developing that could be pretty interesting. But yeah, I think it's a strong suit for our region in the Triangle, but I think we could extend that in more regions of the state, but it could be the thing that we develop a brand and a reputation for regionally, nationally, and maybe internationally. So I think that has a large state level kind of implication, but I'd love to help talk with you specifically about that.
Well, the Biotech Center just started a new program called the Pioneer Challenge, and Wilmington was the first of the cities. Now, I think the Biotech Center has a center in almost every major city in North Carolina. So Wilmington just happened to be the first. It was a $25,000 kind of accelerator program, and so they've already announced the winners for that. And the Biotech Center is going to put these Pioneer Challenges in these other centers across the state. So if you're interested in the life sciences, I would certainly keep my eye open for that program.
That's great. And then for the Live Oak Venture Fund for FinTech, is there any other requirement? What is it?
Canopy, CANAPI.
Is there any other thing? Is there like another, do they have to be in Wilmington, or is it just
No,
FinTech?
no. It's not an accelerator. It's really a massive fund. They got 35 banks from, I think, international, US and international to contribute towards this. And the deal is that if you're an investor, you've got to eat the dog food. So you've got to use the products that come through this fund. And there's some very talented people that they've recruited for this fund. I met a guy who used to work for the Disney Fund in LA, and he's part of their team, and he still lives in LA. So they're going to be scouring the earth for the best deals, and it's going to be very competitive. But I certainly believe in the live oak and the canopy management and the encino management. There's another company called Aperture that they've got in Wilmington that's already over 100 employees. Apiture, Aperture.
Cool. Well, you're a super amazing, I don't know, representative or delegate of ecosystems everywhere. And it's a pleasure talking to you. And I hope to interact in Wilmington soon, as soon as we can, safely, of course. And yeah, man, I guess any closing thoughts?
Hey, come to the coast and have a cold beverage. We've got some great breweries, and it's a wonderful place, and the beach is open for business, and we need your support and your friends' support to get Wilmington back on its feet. So come on down now that it's warm, and we're eager to connect with you as well.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Jim. And
Thank you.
stay safe, man. And I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.
All right. See you.
Bye.